So here we are overlooking the lovely Delaware River. This is from the Pennsylvania side, and this is at Washington Crossing. Right across there is New Jersey. Now, this is a panoramic shot of a couple of images, and we've got some issues going on with the distortion of the real wide-angle lens that was been used. However, something that's really difficult to do in panoramic photography is when you have something very close like this railing and then distant objects like this, getting them all to line up together. Now that's a subject for another day, and I did do a video for that showing how to do nodal points. However, even with nodal points, you still have the distortion of the wide-angle lens. And what we're going to do today is do some fixes to add some more pop to this image, and when we're done, we're going to be looking a lot more like this. So let's go through the process. Now, one thing to clean up the interface a bit, so you can only have to look at one thing at a time, is I'm going to make it so that all of these side editing menus in the Develop module here in Lightroom, we only see one at a time. So if you click in this gray area on any of these, by the way, and hold down the Control or right-click on a PC, there's an option menu that comes up, and the one you want to select is Solo Mode. And what Solo Mode does is, as you open up Windows, it closes all the other windows, so you don't have this big long thing that you'd have to scroll up and down on. And as usually, we're going to start out with the basic panel just to see how far that's going to get us. Now, the highlights are very bright, but when we look at the histogram, we can see, well, that's a pretty darn good histogram. We're right up against the right. This is the highlight warning button. If I click on that, if there were any highlights that were blown out, it would turn red. In fact, let me just boost the exposure so you can see that's what would happen. You'd start to get that red. Oh, another quick tip, by the way. You can double click on any of the words rather than drag the slider back, and that will reset it to 0. On the shadow side, even though there's a lot of pixels that are dark, and by the way, that's what the height of these the graph means. It's really not important that you see that, but if I click on here, we would see blue show up if there was any black clipping. Now, I'll show you, I'll bring it down, you see that stuff starts to turn blue. But again, nothing to concern us because it's getting close to the edge, but not hitting it. So we have a perfect exposure here. So now we need to shape it. First thing, let's bring the highlights down. Bring them a lot further down in order to bring out the details in these beautiful clouds. And then counter to that, we're going to open up those shadows. So let's bring those up. Oh, let's see. We'll bring, I don't know, 80% or so. Yeah, right around there. So whites and blacks are okay, but now we've decreased the contrast by doing this. Let's go ahead and add some what's called midtone contrast with the clarity slider. And I'm going to come up quite a bit on this, probably about 40 points or so. Let's see what 41, that's perfect. And then below that, now we're not going to deal with dehaze because there's absolutely no haze during this day. However, vibrance will increase the saturation of cooler and desaturated colors, and that means blues and greens. And that's a predominant color scheme in here. So let's add some vibrance here. In fact, we're going to add a lot of vibrance to this to really bring it out. In fact, again, I'm going to go up in the 40s, and already you can see, wow, what a difference. In fact, so I can show them side by side, I'm going to create a virtual copy of this, which you can do by going up to Photo, Create Virtual Copy, or you can see it's Command apostrophe. So let's hit Command apostrophe. We'll create a copy of that. You see a new copy shows up next to it. And I'm going to reset that one, which will set all our sliders back. And what that allows us to do is real quick, we can just bounce back and forth and see. Now you can also see that when we did this by adding the clarity, we actually caused a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. You can see down in here, you see those little blue dots. Now, here's a question. Should you care? Should you care that there is some pure black in there? Well, if we look to see where this pure black is, it's in deep shadows under the plants. The answer is no, we really don't care. And if there was some pure black on the railing, which there is kind of in the middle, well, guess what? It really is pure black, so nothing is being affected that we care about. It's okay to have pure black if the thing really is black. So I'm going to turn off that warning just so we don't have to see that anymore. Now, we've come a long way through that. We've come a long way from where we started, which was right there to there very quickly. We actually have an image that's looking pretty good. A couple other fine things we want to do, though. The blue, even though it's gotten more saturation than where we started, which was right there, The blue to me has got a slight bit of a cyan tint to it, so I'd like to make it a little bit more blue. So to do that, I'm going to go to this panel, which is Use Saturation Luminance, and I'm going to change the hue of the blue. Now I could just start messing with the sliders, or I can click on here, which is the adjustment point, and then you click on the color that you want to affect. And as your cursor goes over it, you can see that the slider that's appropriate to that color lights up. Now, if it's made up of several colors, more than one slider may light up. As we come into the green, you can see green is primarily the color. So I'm just going to click, and if I push up, it will make it more blue. I could take it all the way to purple if I wanted. Conversely, go the other way and you can make it really cyan. I want to come up, I think, what do we think about for this? Let's bring it up about 12 to 14 points. And also you can see as we're moving the slider that it's affecting both the blue and the aqua sliders. So that's a more, to my eye, a more natural looking blue. Now the next thing I'm going to deal with is right in here. We've got this distortion from the wide angle lens and this fence being very close to me. And by the way, I did not put this fence in here as a beautiful element for the scene. This was really done as a demonstration for nodal point correction for panoramics, but we'll discuss that another day. Let's just, in the meantime, we're going to go into lens corrections. And what we need to do is adjust the distortion slider, because we can counter this distortion caused by the wide angle lens. So I'm going to come in here and go out, I think again about 40 points or so. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, right around there. And you can see we have the grid, so we can start to straighten out the lines. And again, they don't have to be perfectly straight. Get them pretty straight. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Now, obviously, you can see as we do that, it causes this kind of pin cushioning. And we can just click on Constrain Crop, which will automatically crop it for us, as you see there. Or I actually prefer not to do that, because I'd like to have the control of what I want left to right. I can sacrifice a little bit of the foreground and a little bit of the top, and that will give me more left to right. And I can see I have some more area over to the one side of this tree, which I like. And do I need over here? Yeah, I just like to have this little opening on the far bank, and then the tree that forms a barrier right at the edge. And then I'll hit enter on that. And liking this a lot. Look again, we started there, and that quickly we've come to here. Two last things. We're going to go over to detail and choose sharpening. Now, what do we want to have sharpened? Obviously, the plants we want sharpening, so we can go ahead and zoom in on here. And I'm going to bring the sharpening up a little bit more. But the masking slider is important, because we have these big areas of solid blue. And if we sharpen something that has no detail in it, all it does is it gets grain in it. And you can kind of see the blue has sort of like a sandpapery texture. We don't want to apply sharpening to the areas that there's nothing to sharpen. So we have the masking slider, and in order to make the masking slider really work, you have to hold down the Alt or Option key and then click on it. And that turns the entire screen white. And what that's meaning is the entire image is getting sharpened. Well, we don't want the entire image, we want the edges. So as we drag off to the right, I want to drag far enough so that those big blue areas of sky are not having any sharpening applied. So in that case, I come down to 60, and I'm not sure how well you can see it on your screen, but now where we had that graininess in the sky, that's now gone, because the sharpening has now been done selectively. Lastly, we did bring up the shadows quite a bit. You can see we came up 81%, which is quite a bit. And when you bring up the shadows that much, sometimes you can introduce some more noise, or not introduce it, you're actually revealing a little more. So even though I'm not necessarily seeing it here, in fact, it's actually looking pretty darn good, but just for safety's sake, maybe getting a little bit of noise in here, I'm just going to add about 20-25 points of noise reduction that will just smooth out some of those deep shadows that might have picked up some noise. And that's it. Quite the transformation, done fairly simply We started out here, a nice scene, but turned it into something really lovely, straightened out most of the distortion, have a lovely scene from left to right. And again, as I mentioned, I will provide you guys with a link to a product demonstration that I did for a company called Novaflex that explains how to do these really wide panoramics and have both your foreground elements and the distant elements line up. So stay tuned for that.